we'll have Sainath, and then Sainath again needs no introduction. But it would be interesting if we can also hear from you, Sainath, about your Pari experiment and what why you've decided to move to a completely different medium.
Well, I'll try bringing in something in that, if the time permits. But given the subject and area that we have, but why do the media do what they do, and the confusion over the four estates? One problem with the four estates is that of the four estates of democracy, media is the only one that is profit-seeking. None of the others are. And we have very much in this city a media where it's very difficult to tell the difference between fourth estate and real estate. I keep two sayings close to me for the last 30 years, one of them now growing yellow on a card. Both of them from great journalists, though one of them we only know as a novelist or a writer. Mark Twain actually was a journalist, and he earned his living as a reporter. Till the end of his life, he saw himself and identified himself as a journalist. The other is by Murray Kempton. These two, I guess these sayings need some updating in our digital age, but they convey something. The first is Mark Twain. Yours was not in the beginning a criminal nature, but circumstances changed it. At the age of 9, you stole sugar. At the age of 15, you stole horses. At 19, you committed arson. And at 25, you robbed banks. At 30, hardened by crime, you became an editor. Murray Kempton's is slightly closer to our time than Mark Twain. And today you can see it actually happening. When he was the editor of the New Republic, in a time when that journal was really something wonderful. And Murray Kempton said, the job of the editorial writer is to go down into the valley after the battle is over and shoot the wounded. That's what you do. I think that I'm going to skip a lot of things because I'm so much in line with what Shashi and Nikhil have said. And both of them have spoken about the narrowness of composition. Here's one of your gigantic problems, and I'm going to come to structural reasons for it. You've got a society that's incredibly diverse, heterogeneous, complex. And you've got a media that's shrinking to narrower and narrower and narrower control. The more your society is heterogeneous, the more your media is getting homogeneous. And that is an incredible, irreconcilable contradiction. Why that is so, we'll look at. Also, it looks at, as Shashi said so pointedly, on the nature of your panels and debates. What is the social composition of this? Has anyone done? Who are the panelists on these channels, for instance? Who are the columnists in the newspapers? It's an extremely small, incestuous circle. But I'm just bringing that in to tell you one experience of an old friend, now no more, Mr. Vinod Mehta, who was editor Outlook. He was on so many panels at the same time on different days that it used to get him confused. So one day, evening time, Vinod having his glass and telling the anchor of one program, listen, Rajdeep, and the anchor gets very offended and says, I'm not Rajdeep, I'm Arnab. I think though, and I think that one of the points that Shashi made is literally perhaps the most important thing we need to be looking at that soldier on the border. The thing is this, that I have done and spoken at a lot of places and institutions on, say, and I think Kanhaiya made this point brilliantly in his very wonderful speech. I've done a lot of talks at various government-related institutions on the farm suicides. One of it was pleasing, surprising to find that the most sympathetic response came from institutions associated with the armed forces. Because so many of your jawans are kisans in uniform. Okay? They are soldiers in uniform. One of them told me, a very senior officer at the Defense Military College said, I'm worried about the boys from Maharashtra. They fear a call from the village. They call their families, they're happy. But if they get a call suddenly from home, they're scared. They don't want to know what happened at home. Okay? There is such a close relationship between these different, but in fact they are from the same class. We're talking about that. What we need to worry about a lot is also the larger socialization that the media do. From your school days, from the publishing, from the textbooks, everything else, you heard a lot of that very beautifully put today in various speeches, in various talks today. Unfortunately, I would say that yes, there is a turnaround in the media. The Kanhaiya case has collapsed. There's something to be taking heart from, but there is also a major area of damage, and established with considerable help from the media, even from those who have taken a different line, and that is that they have managed to sell and frame a debate of national versus anti-national. Okay, that and look at who it comes from. People whose ideological forebears never participated in the national struggle. People whose ideological leaders gave whining letters of apology to the British, crying to be let out of prison while others went on hunger strike to death over there. People who assassinated the father of the nation and then teach you nationalism. And again, what you've done is that an entire generation in the media in the last 20, 30 years, an entire generation has been robbed of its history. They have no clue what happened in the national struggle, who did what, who were the nationalists, and who were the collaborators of British imperialism. However, by the way, this year will mark the 200th anniversary of some of the first serious Indian journalism. Raja Ram Mohan Roy, 1860s. Here's a person who from day one didn't give you bullshit about objectivity and everything else. He spoke against child marriage. He spoke against sati. He spoke against female infanticide. He spoke about a number of issues. And by the way, in 1816, he established that paper called Miratul Akbar, which by the way was not in Bengali but in Persian, which was then the elite language of the Mughal court and everything else. So you've got 200 years, and again I go with Shashi on this, that it's not just a small group, but it's a small period. The last 25, 30 years are pretty disgraceful, but there's a much larger history to Indian journalism that all of us can be proud of, that we can be proud of. The journalists who produce the maximum by way of actual output, 100 volumes each, were a couple of guys called Ambedkar and Gandhi. They were your journalists. They were the journalists of this country. 100 volumes of collected works. How many journalists have produced one? Yeah. So, but major changes have taken place. I don't think, angry though I am with individual anchors and editors, I think there are much larger processes at work that are destroying journalism. And if we don't address those, just changing the anchor will not help you. Okay? These guys are there because they're allowed to be there, because we have reduced in the last 20 years, we've reduced journalism to a revenue stream. That's what we've done. You have to justify yourself by the revenue. Now, why has that happened? It's happened because of the corporatization of the media. Okay? Entities have controlled the media today that are larger, more powerful commercial entities than the Indian media have ever known. So you have come from enormous diversity. The Hindu was Shashi? created with 50 rupees. 5 rupees the original owners had, 5 rupees, borrowed 5 rupees from their cousins. Today, 50 rupees could be the cost of printing a Sunday edition. Okay? Yeah. Now, in the last 25-30 years, media ownership concentration has taken place so rapidly, so massively. Take, for instance, today the largest network, Network 18. It's owned by Mukesh Bhai. You know, don't laugh. I mean, if all of us remain in journalism in 5 years, we could all be owned by Mukesh Bhai. If you look at it, I mean, how does he doesn't know the names of all the channels he owns. Now, you have such a powerful, and yet they could issue a fatwa, Aam Aadmi Party will not be covered in the elections. They could just do that, right? The commercial interests of these channels represent the commercial interests of the largest corporations in the country. Okay, so you're going to have extreme tightening over content, extreme tightening over the control of this. Now, all of you have seen ETV Marathi, ETV Tamil, ETV Malayalam, ETV Odia. How many of you know that all the ETVs except Telugu are owned by Mukesh Ambani? All of them. All the ETVs except the Telugu bouquet are owned by the same man who owns CNN, IBN, and all the journalists on board. Right? So you have an astonishing narrowing of control, and the more you have a narrowing of that control, the greater. So journalism has been reduced to a revenue stream. Here's the second problem. The media today, and for the last 20 years, the owners of these corporations that control the media are the biggest beneficiaries of neoliberalism's privatization of public resources. So they're going to be on board with whichever government. Everyone seems to forget that Manmohan Singh was treated like a god for his first 5 years. All these great anchors in 2009 said, this is not the victory of the Congress party, it is Manmohan Singh's victory, it's the victory of the economic reforms. Please look, the next round of privatization on the anvil. Spectrum, who gains? All media owners, very large media owners, if mining is being, as it is being, privatized, Tatas, Birlas, Ambanis, Adan, all of them are going to be the big beneficiaries. If oil and natural gas are being privatized, SR, Ambanis, all of them are going to be the major beneficiaries. Spectrum, likewise, Tatas, Ambanis, Birlas. Your media owners are poised to be the biggest beneficiaries of policies of privatization of public resources, and they will get into the banks also when those are privatized, into the public sector banks. Now, how the hell are they going to rebel against the policies that are driving millions to destitution? That's one question. And here's the second problem. Here's the bite. They invested a few years in building up this Führer-like figure called Narendra Modi. Now he is not able to deliver, and they don't know what to do. In the process, all his rivals have been reduced to dust. They've been consigned to the dustbins of Gujarat or to the Margdarshak Mandal in Delhi. Now you brought this guy here. He has not been able to push your land acquisition bill. He's not been able to do a hell of a lot of things that you're salivating for. Now they're stuck. They're angry with him, but they don't have a replacement. What do? So now you're seeing some amount of leeway in the media and some a little bit of whining now and then. I say it again, the Indian media are politically free but imprisoned by profit. That is the character of the Indian media. I'm not so impressed by the turnaround in the media on Kanhaiya. Remember this, they got millions of eyeballs by carrying his speech. They got millions and millions of eyeballs. Their viewership went up fabulously. And many of them accepted the terms of the debate of the BJP when they would say, what was done to Kanhaiya was wrong, but you have to begin it by saying, I must say that I am absolutely against the anti-national slogans. There weren't any. But you have to apologize in advance, and you've accepted that framework and slotted yourself into that framework. Now, also I have to tell you 3 trends in journalism worldwide. The saddest is this. Corporatization is not just in India, it's happening much faster here than in many countries. In US, Australia, it's already happened to a saturation point. Please just look at journalism in the last 10 years. The 3 greatest things impacting on journalism, not one of them has come from mainstream professional journalism. Assange and WikiLeaks, Edward Snowden, and Chelsea Manning. All the 3 great things that have shaken journalism to its foundations, not one of these could come out of a so-called professional news organization, because these guys they're not pro-establishment or pro-big business. They are big business. They are the establishment. So they can't, they are too heavily invested in the market to ever tell you the truth about it. Okay? Their shares will suffer in value if they start examining the share bazaar in any critical way. For God's sake, don't ever invest your money on the basis of tips from newspapers. Okay? I mean, they've got millions of shares out there. They're never going to be able to tell you the truth about it. Please remember this point forever, that the greatest exposures in journalism are coming from outside journalism structures. That's a very, very, very important thing. Second, jobs in public relations industry, whether in Western Europe or in USA, and now increasingly India, are outpacing jobs in journalism 3 to 1. And that's apart from a large number of journalists who function as public relations agents. Okay? So that's another thing that's happening. You've had, because of this point of revenue being the chief criteria, you've had the private treaties, whereby Shashi is a corporation. He wants to make the big league. He's in a middling-sized corporation. And he comes to me. I'm the biggest English newspaper in the planet. And I tell Shashi, okay, we sign a private treaty. It sounds like, what sounds like a treaty between 2 nations or between the United Nations or something. But it basically gives me 10% of shares in his company. After that, there can be no negative reporting or coverage of Shashi's company in my newspaper. Now, when a newspaper develops shares in 200 companies, is that a newspaper or an equity firm? It's happened, guys. More than 200 companies. That is your situation. I'm going to take a few minutes to just run through this. What then is this good journalism thing about? Look, good journalism is a society in conversation with itself. A nation in debate and argument with itself. That's good journalism. Yeah? I mean, it's one aspect of good journalism. It's a public service. And when we try monetizing this sort of a public service, you pay a terrible price for it. Now, I started a thing called the People's Archive of Rural India. By the way, rural India, 833 million people, 784 languages, 6 of them spoken by more than 50 million, 3 of them spoken by more than 80 million. According to the Center for Media Studies, Delhi's latest report, rural India, village India, gets 0.18% of space on the front pages of the top 6 newspapers in the country, and 0.16% of space on the prime time of 6 major news channels in the country. That is 3 Hindi, 3 English. The CMS of Bhaskara Rao. Okay. Now, so I started something called People's Archive of Rural India to try and capture a gigantic transition that's on. But the 1/3 of us who live in urban India have lost our roots in the 2/3 where we came from, because every one of us in this room was a villager 4 generations ago. But whatever you do, people will ask you, yeah, but I was at the Indian Institute of Management recently. Yeah, it's all very nice, but what's your revenue model? I love this word. Now this revenue model, I was just thinking, I was thinking aloud with them. I said, I don't have one, but Just suppose which work of art or literature or creation would be in existence today if the creator had to have a revenue model. Now, if Valmiki had to get approval for his revenue model before writing the Ramayana, or Shakespeare before writing Julius Caesar had to get a revenue model approved. I said, I know one guy who had a very good revenue model. It worked for 40 years. His name was Veerappan. Now they were attendant risks. But what's entrepreneurialism without risk? High risk, high reward. There are things that you can do. And by the way, the media on the communal issue, it's going to get horrible in the next 12 months because 3 out of the 4 states that go to elections, there will be serious communal issues. Those will be Assam, West Bengal and Kerala. So this is going to get a hell of a lot worse in that period. And, they are going to play, who pays the piper calls the tune. You're going to see a lot of dirty stuff coming up as these elections heat up. To this day, the media has done a very poor job of covering the fallout of the beef ban in the state, with 1 or 2 great exceptions, and I must say, in the Times of India of all papers, a fabulous exception, in terms of covering the damage. The beef ban has not just destroyed the Muslims it was supposed to destroy, it's destroyed the Dalits and the Kolhapur chappal industry, it smashed the hell out of the OBCs who control the cattle markets, it's just about smashed everything in the countryside, because you see a bunch of urban lower middle class people or upper middle class people who know nothing about agriculture and the centrality of the cow to the rural economy have taken decisions which has led to the lions in the Mumbai zoo being fed chicken for the first week after the ban. So this is going to get a hell of a lot worse. What can you do? And what is the single biggest difference? I come to what Nikhil said, I'm making it more narrow and specific about an RSS being in power. There is something which makes a thing great. By the way, have the media done any real serious investigation on the murder of the 3 rationalists? Has there been a hard-hitting media investigation into the murder of Comrade Govind Pansare, into the murder of Narendra Dabolkar? The courts are scolding the police and the government for dragging their feet, but there is no serious investigation. Yeah? All the 3 were killed in the same method by the same young men on a motorcycle, while the person, by the way, Haren Pandya in Gujarat was killed the same way, while taking his walk. Okay? Now, what's the difference between this time and all earlier times? According to me, the political situation is dramatically different, unique in our history. For the first time in our history, an RSS Pracharak is Prime Minister with a majority. The earlier Pracharak was pretty jaded, and there had been 40 years of softening between his being an active Pracharak and his being Prime Minister, and he had a minority and used to whine about coalition dharma, though he was much cleverer than the present incumbent. But he had a minority, he did not have a majority. A hell of a lot of that has changed when you have a Pracharak with a majority. Now the media negotiating space with this regime, please understand this. I believe, and I believe that this country is ruled by a coalition of social religious fundamentalists and market economic fundamentalists. And they need each other. So you're going to find, what are the things that you can do? There is a very strong case for fighting for democratization of media. Yes, by law, by legislation, by popular movement. Listen, art, literature, journalism, storytelling, these did not come out of the investments of corporations. They came out of communities, out of people, out of societies. Let's try and take it back to people, to communities, to societies. Again, when Shashi mentioned who are the people who stood for freedom, who created your space as journalists. When Bal Gangadhar Tilak was imprisoned for sedition, people came out on the streets and died to defend his freedom as a journalist. That was the working class of Mumbai that came out of the textile mills and died for it. Some of them were maybe people who could not read, but they came out to defend an Indian's right to freedom of expression. Okay? There was a great organic link between the Indian media and the Indian masses. You had during the Bengal famine, Biplabi, New Democracy, all these papers covering the famine from underground. You need to fight for democratization of the media, for strengthening of the public broadcaster. You need to be able to break monopoly. Monopoly se azadi. You need to break the monopoly over media ownership. You've got to increase diversity in the ownership of media. You've got to not only strengthen the public broadcaster, but increase the public space in the private fora that media have become. And believe me, don't put your faith in things like the internet is free. The digital monopolies are the biggest monopolies of all. But we need to fight for that space and do it. It can be done. It won't be easy. It can be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Sainath. Absolutely. Only 3 questions? That's impossible. I don't think so. I can already see many. Okay, so the first hand that I saw go up, there's another one there, and there, right behind. Okay. Yeah. If you can keep your question really pointed to the speakers, then hopefully we may be able to get more questions.
My question is regarding Mr. Nitin Wagle's statement about how Mohsin Sheikh's killing wasn't covered. Recently, in fact, for a long time, we know that the media has had a very high concentration of upper caste journalists in it. Dalits are not represented, Muslims are not represented. Do you think that representation of diverse communities in media can probably solve that kind of a bias in reporting the cases?
I think it will help, but it will not solve the problem. Because the problem is here, mental block, about covering minorities. You see, Mohsin Sheikh, a Muslim youth, was killed. At that time, there were small riots in Pune also. Some of the small places of worship of Muslims were attacked. Some of the dargahs were attacked. No mainstream media for first 8 days covered it. So that was mental block. We are not ready to believe our Muslim brothers and sisters. They were telling us, this has happened. This has happened in our community. Because media generally has a mentality of majority community. That is the main problem.
Okay. So that, I think your question.
I have a question to P. Sainath. Sir, you wrote many things on suicide of farmers and middle class consumerism. My question is about the media. Is it possible to free from the breaking news or sensitive news to media? Because of in current generation, we have a habit of the consumerism and as well as the part of the breaking news. Can you free it from that? Because we want a mature media, right? Like that Janta, which was running by Dr. Ambedkar, like that the Bhaskar Bharat, and then the Kesari, and then Maratha, who was writing the Dinuran Deve. We want this kind of media. It is possible to
If I understand your question, I was linking the problem to the larger role of socialization that the media plays. That consumerism, everything that comes from there, it comes at such a level where every other channel has that Sensex monitor ticking in one corner. It came to such a question where, it came to such a point where President K.R. Narayanan died and the body was being taken out in morning, the census ticker was going upwards. I mean, it's that much a commercialized, hyper-commercialized entity. On the breaking news thing, I think we are unique in the world. There is no part of the planet where news breaks every second. Yeah. In other countries, on other channels, breaking news may sometimes be something once in a week, if that, or once in a day. But you have to have that every single second. It's the nature of the beast that we've constructed. If you want to move away from that, you've got to move away from the TRP system, you've got to move away from the eyeball system, all those ways of counting. It's possible, it's not, it doesn't look like happening just now.
Okay, hi.
Yes. There's one question. Yes, you had said three, and Afred there had done this.
Just a quick question. We've been discussing good media, good journalists, bad journalists. Can we talk about good money, bad money? Just a thought. We treat money as something.
That's a comment?
No, it's not. It's a question. We treat money as something inherently bad. My only question is, we see a lot of money being pumped in, corporates owning media. Can't we go the opposite route where we use money for our agenda and, in the sense, good propaganda? So, I mean, why can't we do that?
Well, let me balance it a bit. I think it's fair to say that a healthy financial bottom line is important for a free media. If you don't have a healthy financial bottom line, you won't be able to be bold. You won't be able to take on the government. You won't be able to take on the forces that are arrayed against you. But that is very different from what Sainath was talking about. Profiteering can't be the sole aim of the media. So you can have independent media, autonomous media, which is not financially, where financial profits or profits are not the motive. But the big media also have their place in terms of, and some of the big stories, some of the big investigative stories may have been pursued and brought to the logical end because somebody kept at it. I think so. So good money, bad money. I think in that sense. Having said that, let me before I just not by way of this thing. There's good Arnab and bad Arnab also. Because I said all, but the good Arnab is as follows. Even that is perverse. Well, I now find that it's very difficult to hate anybody who's appeared on this program. Even people you hate otherwise. Subramanian Swami is a man I could not stand. But once he's passed through Arnab's program, I began to have a sneaking admiration for him. There are people, there are crooks and, all kinds of con fellows in this society whom you don't like. But once Arnab has, taken him through his waterboarding, third degree, you are siding with them. And so it's almost this good, bad is there in the same person also. I think media can give you both. It's a very, very strange thing.
Okay, we have to come to the end.
Can I? Okay.
Okay, since we really must give. Yes, we can't ignore the panelists.
So my question is to any of the panelists who want to answer it. What I want to say is agreed that the media is not going out of their way to make content good. But that is the sort of content that is being lapped up by a lot of people who watch TV also. So sensationalized content is what everybody wants right now. So what can we do to sort of sensitize people to watch better quality stuff, TV and print?
Okay. Well, this chicken and egg situation simply doesn't work. Because we've had the Times of India tell us for years that people wanted to read Bombay Times, and that's why they wanted it. And several of us grew up without it. It was perfectly fine, the kind of gossip, and now the editorial. So I don't accept that really. We really have to look for, weaning people away from the kind of sensational manner in which the media sells everything.
Just to say, giving the people what they want, somebody said this, NBC's president once said it, giving the people what they want is a dope peddler's argument.
I just have to end. I'm sorry but okay, Vivek has very quick intervention. Vivek, please.
I had to, raise this question because you don't find Nikhil and Sainath and Shashi all in the same platform at one time. So the question is for all three of them. I come from a trade union, And just a few days back, there was a meeting in Delhi of the officers' associations of banks, railways, BSNL, okay. And one of the issues that was raised there was about media. That we have been fighting privatization for 25 years, reasonably successfully, but it never finds its expression in media. So my question to all three of them is, see, trade unions have resources. So if all these trade unions who are fighting privatization have got together, I don't know anything about the economics of running a TV channel. But do you think that if all these unions got together, would there be sufficient resources to run a TV channel?
I am afraid, but this financing by trade unions, will it curb our freedom? That is my problem.
You must take one question more from the minority in the balcony,
But
Okay, just 1 second. I'm extremely sorry.
We really need to answer.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Two more questions I'm sorry, we have to end the program at 9 and we have an artist waiting on
Okay.
stage.
Then Vivek, very quickly, I just want to add something in a sense that one of the biggest, to my mind, one of the biggest factors in the loss of journalist independence has been the decline and death of journalist unions. The loss of journalist unions and the shift to contract journalism has been one of the biggest sources, laying the ground for paid news, for pressures and stuff like that.
Well, I don't want to get into the fact that journalists have become the most rapidly pauperized members of the middle class today. They're unorganized, completely unorganized. And in the last 20 years, we have seen the pauperization of many of our colleagues. Several of them who struggle to get, their wages, freelancers don't get paid. Absolutely, after the fact that unions have been crushed completely and the laws that exist simply do not support them. So that is, and I'm glad you said this, Sainath, because I wanted to end really with this. The fact is that journalists, ordinary journalists who go out to get their stories and who look for those stories are being killed in India today. We've had about 7 to 8 deaths last year and several more attacks this year. So journalists who are still, despite the fact that they work for media houses which are heavily compromised, they're still going out there to get those stories. They're still under pressure. The Z News journalist had resigned on the Kanhaiya issue. So we've got a number of people who are working within the media who are fighting. And we really have to think about how to strengthen them, strengthen their voices. I'll end here. It's been a wonderful audience. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.